Ed and Lorraine Warren were famous for their involvement in some of the most infamous paranormal cases in modern day history. But we've all heard of the Amityville Horror, the haunting in Connecticut, the Devil Made Me Do It case. So today we're not focusing on those. Today we're looking at paranormal cases so terrifying that even the Warrens themselves would be too scared to investigate. I'm your host James, and these are the top 10 paranormal cases too disturbing for Ed and Lorraine Warren. And we're kicking off the list today with the haunting of the Ammons family. There was a lot going on with this case. It's similar to some of the stuff Ed and Lorraine dealt with, but it would have terrified them for sure. This whole situation played out back in 2011, and it became one of the most well-documented possession/haunting cases in recent years. Latoya Ammons and her family moved into a rental house in Gary, Indiana, where they soon began experiencing terrifying and inexplicable paranormal events. The family reported hearing footsteps, creaking floors, and voices, especially during the night when the house was quiet. That's your more standard spooky haunted house stuff, but even crazier, the young ones allegedly started levitating, floating above their beds or being thrown across the room by some unseen force. Latoya and her children also began displaying signs of possession. They were speaking in deep voices, growling, and demonstrating unnatural strength and aggression. The house was also infested with flies, even during the winter months. Several witnesses, healthcare professionals, social workers, and even police officers who filed official reports stating that they had witnessed unusual and unexplained phenomena in the house. So it doesn't seem like this was just the family spouting stuff off. Number 9, the Kaimuki House. This is said to be one of the most haunted houses in Hawaii. In 1941, police responded to a frantic phone call from a woman screaming about her family being attacked. Authorities rushed to the scene, and when they got there, they reported seeing a young boy, his 3 sisters, and their mother, who made the phone call, being tossed around by a seemingly invisible force. A similar horrific incident would happen in the home 30 years later, which police would also report on. Luckily, the home has since been torn down. Condos sit on the property now. As to what was responsible for these odd cases, local legend has it that there was a vengeful corpse that had been buried on the property. Next up, we have the S.K. Pierce Mansion. The house was built in 1875 by Sylvester Knowlton Pierce, a wealthy chair manufacturer. It changed ownership multiple times, but everyone who lived there seemed to have a real lousy time. The home served various purposes. At one point, it was a boarding house, hotel, a restaurant, and during all this time, as ownership changed hands and people moved in and out, some residents never left: the ghosts. In 1965, the home was owned by Ennio Sari, a World War II vet who met his end after being burned alive in his bedroom. The cause of the fire? Not 100% certain. His bed just seemed to mysteriously catch fire. People who would visit that same room later on would often describe the faint smell of something burning. A couple by the name of Edwin Gonzalez and Lillian Otero moved into the home in 2009, and they were only able to stay in the place for 2 years. They had a list of creepy experiences, but it was actually their neighbors who would tell them about this next thing. The folks next door would look out their window on occasion and see a little blonde-haired boy running through the couple's house. Edwin and Lillian didn't have kids. The couple would also report seeing a woman believed to be Mrs. Pierce and a young child, possibly her daughter. They'd also hear unexplained voices and whispers and conversations in seemingly empty rooms. And at number 7 is the Lizzie Borden house. The Lizzie Borden house, located in Fall River, Massachusetts, is infamous for the brutal death of Andrew and Abby Borden that occurred there in 1892. On August 4th, 1892, Andrew and Abby Borden were found dead in their home. Lizzie Borden, Andrew's daughter, was accused of the attack but was acquitted during her trial. The case remains unsolved, and the true identity of the perp has never been definitively proven. Guests claim to have seen apparitions of Lizzie Borden and her parents throughout the house. Some have reported seeing the figures of a man and woman believed to be Andrew and Abby Borden in different rooms. At number 6, we have the Michael Taylor possession. We've heard of some cases where exorcism supposedly worked, but there are a lot more that failed, or in this case, ended in total tragedy. There's a good chance this man was far beyond anything Ed and Lorraine Warren would have been able to deal with. The Michael Taylor possession case, which occurred in Ossett, England in 1974, is one of the most disturbing exorcism cases in recent years. Michael Taylor was a 31-year-old married man with 5 children. He started experiencing behavioral changes in erratic episodes, exhibiting signs of aggression while claiming to be tormented by evil spirits. He was part of a local Christian group called the Christian Fellowship Group, led by Mary Robinson and her husband, Pastor Ray Robinson. The Robinsons and other members of the Christian Fellowship Group decided to conduct an exorcism on Michael that ended up lasting for an entire night. Taylor displayed violent behavior. He would attack the participants. He would growl, speak in tongues. After the prolonged exorcism sessions, Taylor was declared free of the demonic entities by the group, but shortly after returning home, he ended up taking the life of his wife, Christine, in a frenzied attack. When police arrived at the scene, they found Taylor covered in red, strolling down the street in a completely detached state. Taylor ended up being acquitted on the grounds of insanity and was sent to a psychiatric hospital for treatment, which is what should have happened long before. Number 5, the haunted Elsa doll. Now, the Warrens were no strangers when it came to haunted dolls, but after having dealt with Annabelle, I doubt they'd have wanted any part in this. In 2013, the Madonia family in Houston got an Elsa doll from Frozen for their young daughter. It would sing and say phrases from the movie. Everything was pretty normal for the first 2 years, but according to their mother, Emily Madonia, the doll started to go back and forth between English and Spanish, just out of nowhere. There was no button for it, just completely random. They had the doll all the way up until 2019, and during this whole time they never even had to change the doll's batteries. And the creepiest part, Elsa would occasionally say phrases even when its power was switched off. Family did what anyone would do in this situation. They chucked Elsa in the trash, but weeks later they found her in the basement. They attempted to get rid of the doll again, putting the doll in the trash all the way at the bottom of the bin right before the garbage was collected for the day. Then they left town for a few days, but when they got back, guess who was sitting in their backyard? Elsa had returned yet again. Now, the most logical explanation is that someone was playing a prank. According to the mother, though, the doll was taken away by the garbage men, and the doll in the backyard had a distinctive mark that her daughter had left on it years before, so it seemed to be the same one. I'm not going to accuse the dad, but all I know is I know what I'd do if my family was freaked out by a doll and wanted to get rid of it, so I'd probably have some fun. Anyway. At number 4, we have the Hopkinsville Goblin encounter. Goblins, you don't hear about many real-life goblin encounters. Unfortunately, this is just another alien encounter case. La-di-da. Anyway, not sure how Goblin became part of the name. In August of 1955 in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, the Sutton and Taylor families witnessed strange lights streaking across the sky. Later that night, they heard odd noises outside of the farmhouse, including scratching, tapping, and footsteps on the roof. The situation took a even more bizarre turn when the families spotted small, silver-skinned beings about 2 to 3 feet tall with large glowing eyes, long arms, and sharp claws. Terrified, they fired at the creatures, but the bullets seemed to have no effect, so the families called the police, who found no evidence of intruders. They ended up going to the police station and recounted their experience. Next up, we have the Bell Witch. The story goes that in rural Tennessee, back between 1817 and 1821, the Bell family, John Bell, his wife Lucy, and their children, came under attack by an unseen aggressive entity. The Bells lived in a settlement called Red River near Addams, Tennessee. The strange occurrences began in 1817 when the family reported hearing unexplained knocking on the walls of their home. And over time, these noises escalated into worse things. Whatever this entity was, it started interacting with the family, speaking to them, and even causing physical harm. It became known as the Bell Witch. Apparently, it had a very distinctive voice, but it could also mimic the voices of other people. John Bell, in particular, suffered physical attacks from the entity. He experienced choking, slapping, pinching, spanking, which contributed to his declining health. One theory is that the Bell Witch was connected to a neighbor named Kate Batts. She was involved in a property dispute with the Bell family and was thought to be responsible for the supernatural events. John's health deteriorated rapidly, and eventually he passed away in 1820. The Bell Witch was said to have taken credit for his death, claiming to have poisoned him. After John's death, things eventually died down. No pun intended. At number 2, we have the Germana Cele possession. Clara Germana Cele was a 16-year-old South African girl attending a Roman Catholic mission school. In 1906, she started exhibiting disturbing behavior. She would speak in languages she had seemingly never learned: Polish, German, and French. She would also show aversion to sacred objects and symbols. Witnesses reported that Clara exhibited superhuman strength during her episodes, overpowering multiple people trying to restrain her. Clara reacted violently to religious symbols, crosses, holy water, prayers, leading many to believe that she had been possessed by some sort of dark force. The local Catholic priest, Father Erasmus Horner, was called to investigate Clara's condition. After witnessing her behavior and conducting interviews, he became convinced that Clara was possessed by a malevolent entity. Several exorcism attempts were made on Clara. The exorcisms were performed by Father Erasmus Horner and a team of priests. After this series of exorcisms, first few didn't really take, Clara was reported to have finally been freed from this demonic possession, and she apparently returned to a normal state with no memory of the events that had transpired during her possession. Finally, though, we have Houska Castle. This place is said to be a full-on gateway to hell. Forget about ghosts murmuring in the night or slamming doors. Here there are said to be full-on winged demonic monsters lurking in the shadows. In the Czech countryside sits Houska Castle. It was built in the second half of the 13th century, sitting over an incredibly deep pit in the ground. The strange thing about the castle is that it sits in the middle of nowhere. There's no water source nearby, no trade route. It wasn't built in any strategically advantageous place. So what was this castle built for? Well, it all has to do with the giant hole it sits on top of, a hole that is said to be a gateway to hell. Before Houska Castle was erected, locals would report strange phenomena surrounding the pit. Winged monsters were said to fly forth from its depths, and it was so deep that nobody could see the bottom. You'd have to be lowered down to see what was in there, and one story goes that a man did volunteer to check things out, and whatever he saw turned his hair gray and made him lose his mind. So Houska Castle was built, fortress built, not to keep invaders out, but to keep demonic forces in. The place is so notorious that back in World War II, members of the SS were said to perform dark rituals at the castle, which sounds like pure fiction until you read about how into the occult they actually were, so that's not that surprising. With all that said, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.